Hello and welcome back to Breaking Consensus here on Protect Life. Today I'm delighted to welcome back to the audience here Dr. Dermot Kearney. Before we get started, I'd just like to draw your attention first to the subscribe button there. If you click on that, any new materials that we do create, you will be advised of them. And then there's the donate button there. As you know, we're always engaged in different causes and different fights, and we need your help, and anything at all you can give something will be really greatly appreciated. So Dr. Dermot Kearney, he's the I think am I right, the president of the Catholic Medical Association or whatever?
The former president.
Former president. Okay. So for people who haven't come across it before, Dermot, could you just tell us a bit about yourself and your background, as it were?
Well, I'm Irish, as you probably recognise. I'm working as a consultant cardiologist and a general physician in the northeast of England. Qualified, did all my initial training in Ireland. Most Irish doctors, if they want to stay in hospital medicine, they're expected to get some international experience. I went to Holland for a couple of years, spent 2 years in Leiden and Amsterdam, hoping eventually to get back to Ireland, but there were, at that time, back in the early 2000s, there were very few jobs for cardiologists and general physicians in the Irish Health Service. So I got a job in the north of England. One of my colleagues was already here. He asked me to come over and have a look at the place. So it seemed okay. So I initially came with the intention of spending 1 or 2 years here, and 1 became 10, became 20. And so I'm 21 years in the northeast of England. As you mentioned, I'm a member of the Catholic Medical Association. I got involved in that in 2008 when I came across a young doctor working in our area who had been put under pressure to prescribe abortion pills. She was asked one evening when she was on call to prescribe the pills for the young girl that was going to have the termination in the morning. And she was Catholic, and she says, "I'm sorry, I can't do that." And the nurses were astounded. And they said, "Well, if you don't do it, we have to call in the consultant." And they did. And he shouted at her in front of the nurses and the patients that people like her shouldn't be allowed to work in this country. But she wasn't entitled to do it. He was breaking the law in doing that. And he did apologise to her a few days later, but she remained steadfast. She remained firm. She wouldn't give in. And I didn't know her at the time, but I got to know her shortly afterwards. And I said, that poor girl, she was relatively new to this country. She'd qualified abroad. She knew nobody in the hospital, or very few people. She knew nobody would stand up for her. And I said, there must be some organisation somewhere in the country that will stand up for people like this. So I went to my office that same day and I looked up Catholic Doctors Medical Associations, and I came across the UK Catholic Medical Association that I joined and became actively involved, set up a branch in the Northeast region. And then in 2014, I became a council member around 2010, a couple of years after joining. And we had council meetings 3 or 4 times a year to discuss sort of strategies and ideas and conferences and so on. And in 2014, we were approached by the president of the organization Life, the pro-life organization, Jack Scarisbrick, who had heard that there was a possible way that women who had taken the first abortion pill, and I'll come back to that in a moment, could reverse their decision by taking progesterone, because he had heard reports coming in from the United States. And the reason he got interested is that a number of young women had already approached his organization and other pro-life organizations, telling him that they had taken the first abortion pill, they regretted what they had done, and they wanted to try to save their babies. And being a Catholic Medical Association, he presumed, or he had hoped, that we might be interested in helping these women, if nobody else would. I don't know if he had reached out to anybody else, but he certainly came to us. None of us at that meeting knew anything about the issue, but we decided we would look it up. And in 2014, there was very little information. The service had been set up in the United States in 2012. There was small numbers of cases had been reported, and the success rate seemed to be reasonably good. There wasn't a lot of information, but as the years went by, we continued looking into it, but still no breakthroughs were made on our side. In 2018, though, at one of our annual conferences, another staunch pro-life leader, Claire McCulloch from Good Counsel Network, came to it, and she was given a presentation, but she pleaded with us that more and more women were coming to them looking for help to save their babies after they regretted taking that first abortion pill. By this stage, we knew, or at least I knew a little bit about it. I was elected president of the CMA at our AGM that weekend. And I promised Claire that I would look into it more. I would go to the United States. I would meet the pioneers, because it all started in before 2012 with some cases from two people in particular, Doctors George Delgado and Matthew Harrison. I've done the first cases around 2005, 2006, where they were asked to help women who had taken the first abortion pill. And knowing what they did, they both had interest in fertility management and progesterone and so on in pregnancy. And they using their logic, they felt, well, maybe progesterone will help, and it did in those cases. And then they did more cases, and they seem to be working more often than not, and very safely too. So I told Claire I would go to America, I would meet some of these people. I went to conferences, meetings where the issue was discussed, and I gained more and more information. And I decided when I came back and I discussed it with the rest of the council, that we decided we've got to go ahead. We tried to do it in the, let's say, by the correct means. We wrote to NHS England, we wrote to the Royal College of Obstetricians, Gynecologists, the Royal College of General Practitioners, because we thought, we had good evidence that this was safe and it was effective, and women were looking for it. And we thought we would have had a little bit of support from at least one of these august organisations. But sadly, and looking back, probably not surprisingly, we got very negative, unsupportive responsive. The one from the Royal College of Obstetricians, which was a joint letter with the RCGP, was particularly hypocritical and inconsistent, if you want to be a little bit more kind. But their concern was that progesterone is not licensed for this use, because it's a novel idea, and lots of drugs which have been around for a long time, it's suddenly found that they're useful in other ways. So they can be used in an off-license manner, which a lot of drugs are. So they wrote back to us to say, oh, we do not support the use of off-license use of medications. But then when I looked into it, misoprostol, which is the second drug used in abortion, is an off-license use. It's not licensed for abortion. At least it wasn't then. I think it may have gained the license in the last 12 to 18 months. But back in 2019, it certainly wasn't licensed for use in abortion. And furthermore, methotrexate, which is a drug that's used in chronic inflammatory conditions, like rheumatoid arthritis, but it's not licensed for use in any obstetric use, but it's used and widely advocated by the Royal College for Management of Ectopic Pregnancies. So we wrote back to them with that information, and we got no further response.
So the reason they gave initially for their reluctance to endorse this or to go forward with this discussion was because you're talking about that this was using a drug for which it was not originally designed.
Yeah.
It was what's an off-license
use,
off-label,
the Americans say. We say off-license or out of its normal license. Now, it's licensed, it's not unlicensed, so it's off-license. So
sure. But
progesterone has been used for 50 years, more than 50 years, and to support pregnancies. That's what it means actually. Progesterone means progestational steroid hormone. So it's essential to support pregnancy. So, and in most pregnancies, the mother produces large quantities of progesterone to maintain the pregnancy. But in one of the common causes of miscarriage is low levels of progesterone or ineffective function of progesterone. So giving supplemental progesterone for some women can prevent them having recurrent miscarriages. It's been used for many, many decades along those lines.
One doesn't want to ascribe bad intentions to anybody because we can't know really what the intentionality is. But it just strikes me on the face of it completely as a layman that this is the use of off-labels. I mean, at the moment, for example, I have a number of friends who are desperately trying to get hold of Ozempic for weight loss.
Yeah.
And it's been prescribed all over the world for people who have chronic problems with obesity. But it's in some jurisdictions you can't get hold of it unless you're diabetic because it's a diabetic drug.
Yeah.
And it's as a weight loss drug, it's considered to be off-label. I mean, and I'm just thinking that because that happens to be something that's occurred. I've had conversations only today about. So So was the real concern, do you think, was it that it was off-label but there wasn't enough background science done on this, so that there was a safety concern, or do you think was a general reluctance to get involved in the messy discussion about abortion because this is something that not just doctors but a lot of people just would prefer not to talk about generally?
Yeah, they're all important points. It certainly, there was no question at that stage of any concerns over safety. That became a later excuse. And we'll probably come back to that. The only concern that the RCOG and the RCGB expressed was, oh no, this is unlicensed. Because we had sent them a very detailed, actually a 4-page letter, given all the evidence that was there in support of it. We acknowledged that there was opposition to it, but we felt that the opposition was unfounded, because the opposition was, at that stage, in the United States, the only reason given by the main protagonists, the main players who were opposed to it, who were 2 guys called Daniel Grossman and Michelle Kleinen, both in California, who were very much involved in promotion of chemical abortions. The only opposition that they gave was that this is not needed. It's junk science. It's not needed. Women do not change their mind. That was, there is an interview with Daniel Grossman on Huffington Post where actually says that. He's asked specifically, Dr. Grossman, is your concern about the treatment? He said, no. It's not the treatment. It's the rhetoric. It's the rhetoric that women change their mind when we know they don't. And the reason for that, I think, as I thought about it many, many times, and because if these people accept that women change their mind, it opens up a whole can of worms. It opens up lots of uncomfortable questions, because then you've got to ask, well, why do women change their mind in this situation? The answer, the obvious answer, certainly in the UK and in Ireland, and I presume it's the same in North America and elsewhere, is that because they get no counselling, they get no alternatives put to them. You know, from the options helpline, if a woman is pregnant, rings up that, she will be pointed in one direction. She will not be said, now, have you thought about adoption, or have you thought about this crisis pregnancy centres in your area that might be able to provide the financial support, the material support, the emotional support? They are not given any of these options, because it'll hit their pockets. Because if women were given, we know that at least 50% of all abortions, and probably more, there is an element of coercion. Now, coercion can be subtle, or it can be very blatant. Coercion can be just, we can't afford this, you're going to lose your job, you won't be able to maintain the lifestyle. There's lots of little ways that women feel pressurized when they would really, really want to hold on to that baby. Because, so if they were given those options in a real concrete and compassionate way, many of them would say, no, I'm not going to have an abortion. And that would have major implications financially for the abortion industry. So I think that's the main reason that they come up with these excuses. Oh, it's unlicensed, or it's off license, or it's now the one they use is it's not safe. And we can come back to that if you wish.
Yeah.
The initial thing was, no, there's no need. Women don't change their mind. Then when they realized women do change their mind, and they couldn't use that excuse any longer, it became, well, it doesn't work. But now we've got 5.5, almost 6,000 babies born with a 50 in the UK, 55% success rate. In America, 65%.
So you said that the reason that they gave it wasn't the process, but rather the rhetoric.
That's what Daniel Grossman. That's his word.
I wonder how I have, following this issue around the world, I've noticed a change in rhetoric, which is curious. For a long time, people who are pro-choice or pro-legalization, liberalization of abortions, I would say, this was a question of choice, but that abortion should be safe, legal, and rare. That was the phrase. One of the things I've noticed in the rhetoric in the United States and other places that has changed. The old idea of safe, legal, and rare, and that's gone because I think there was a sense that they wanted to move away from the idea that it was a big thing, or it was a serious thing, or an issue, perhaps something that people might regret. The idea of abortion regret is something which is dismissed. In your case, the idea that people might change their minds, that women might change their minds, being dismissed, no, it doesn't happen. And have you seen a change in the rhetoric in the United Kingdom?
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah, it's now shout your abortion, be proud of your abortion. They're trying to destigmatize it. They feel that by admitting that, we want it rare, we want it safe, that by doing that, because they want it considered to be just another medical procedure. That they want it to be totally destigmatized. They want women to be proud to show that they've had abortions, because they want to treat it the same as other surgical procedures or medical procedures. Because they want it basically to be eventually decriminalized, because abortion is still a criminal offence in the United Kingdom. It can be carried out under the terms of the Abortion Act, although we know every day that those terms are not adhered to. But strictly speaking, by law, abortion can be carried out if 2 doctors agree that it's necessary under the grounds of A, B, C, D, E, or F. And 98% are done on the basis of ground C, that continuing the pregnancy will harm the mental or physical health of the mother more than the termination at whatever stage, up to 24 weeks. And then they can make excuses after 24 weeks if they want to for usually for eugenics purposes, or claims that it's going to have a detrimental effect on the mother. So there is essentially abortion on demand, but it is still a criminal offence. And the women have been prosecuted, and I don't think they're too concerned about women being prosecuted, but they are concerned about the law being brought to bear against the organisations and the abortionists. And it's amazing that it hasn't happened, because the Care Quality Commission, they've had so many reports criticising their standards of care, their lack of standards of care, their how cheap they treat life. There have been a number of deaths and other near deaths and serious complications, and yet they get away with it. And it's only a matter of time before someone puts 2 and 2 together and say, but then there's a whole question of fraud, because they're claiming, especially now with the chemical abortions and the pills by post, so they get paid a tariff for every one that they complete. So they get, I don't know, it's 500. Probably well over. It was £500 a few years ago. It's probably about £600-700 now. But all it is a consultation by telephone, putting pills into an envelope and sending them to the mother. There's no follow-up. There's no way of ascertaining, is the mother actually pregnant? Is the woman actually pregnant, I should say. As long as the female voice requesting and she says she's not being coerced, because they have to tick a number of boxes to say that this is a voluntary decision by a woman who's pregnant. They've no idea what stage of pregnancy she might be at if she is pregnant. They've no idea, there's no way of ascertaining, are the pills going to be used by her and only by her, or is she going to give them to somebody else? Is she going to store them up and sell them to someone else? Is she going to keep them for a rainy day? Is she going to give them to a sex trafficker, a drug trafficker, or someone who's abusing young teenage girls or underage girls? So there's no way of knowing, and yet they get paid for all this. So I'm going to try and raise in Parliament, if possible, this issue. How can we ensure that we are getting value for money, if you like, or that the NHS or the public are getting value for money, that what is being paid for is actually being carried out, because they don't know. We know from the girls that we've helped that they don't get any follow-up, because the majority of them have contacted or have received the pills by post, and we know that they don't get any follow-up phone calls or visits or consultations to ensure that they have, because presumably they're being included in the statistics of the 260,000 babies, and yet we've got 63 that haven't. So
at the beginning, you said the rhetoric was the question of the off-license use, and then it moved on to the safety. So if you could describe, first of all, the situations in which this is used, the process of how women go about getting the pill, and then what, if and when someone comes to you, what the actual process is, and address the issue regarding the mechanism that the use of progesterone uses, and the issues around safety. You could just address sort of the medicine here, about what happens, who uses it, in what context, in what situation, and how it is reversed.
Of course, yes. So the majority of abortions nowadays are carried out by chemical means, drug means, rather than surgical abortions. Some surgical abortions are still performed, but in the UK it's 90% or so, and in Scotland it's over 95% are performed by drugs. And it's 2 drugs. The first drug is called mifepristone. That is a very specific receptor blocker. It blocks the receptors, the progesterone receptors. It competes for the progesterone receptors with naturally produced progesterone. Progesterone is produced by the mothers, initially by cells from the ovary, and then in the later stage of pregnancy by the placenta itself. And it's essential, as I mentioned, to maintain the pregnancy. So if progesterone levels are low, or if somehow the action of progesterone is blocked, pregnancy will not continue, miscarriage will occur. So that's what this drug mifepristone is designed to do. It's designed to mimic progesterone, but to have a dummy effect or no effect. So it competes for these progesterone receptors and blocks the natural progesterone from having their effect. Because when all steroids all have their effect through receptors, so binds to a receptor, that causes a whole cascade of chemical reactions to take place. So if you can block that cascade of chemical reactions, you cause disintegration of the lining of the womb, and the miscarriage occurs. The second drug is meant to be taken 1 or 2 days later. So mifepristone is designed to basically kill the child or prevent the nutrient supply, and it nearly always, or in most cases, will be successful in doing so. If she takes then the second drug 1 or 2 days later, that's called misoprostol, which is a prostaglandin analog, and that causes intense contraction of the uterus, of the muscle of the womb. and causes expulsion of the baby, who's in most cases will be already dead, sometimes not though, and the other products of conception at the same time. So the aim is to empty the womb, which it does with that combination about 94%. There's about 6 or 7% where there's incomplete emptying of the womb, and the mother then has to have but she's at risk of sepsis and bleeding and ongoing pain, so she has to have an additional surgical procedure in 6 or 7% of cases that we know of. So while this is very effective, if she takes both abortion pills as directed, there's a 98 to 99% chance her baby will die. Now, as I mentioned, it's a 96 or 94% chance that the abortion will be complete, but there's a 98 to 99% chance that her baby will die, even if the abortion is incomplete. So that's 1 or 2% will still manage to survive. Now, the majority of those will subsequently be killed by surgical abortion, but some babies have survived despite being exposed to the initial 2 drugs that has been given. If the mother takes the first abortion pill, if this mifepristone, but for whatever reason doesn't take the second abortion pill, misoprostol, but if she doesn't manage to get hold of people like myself and other doctors who prescribe progesterone, so she's just taking the first pill but doesn't get the abortion pill reversal treatment, there's about an 80% chance that her baby will die. Depends on the stage of gestation, but most of these are around 6, 7, 8, 9 weeks, but some are a little bit later. But overall, there's about a 20% chance the baby will survive, or slightly less than 20% chance, as long as she doesn't take the second pill. If she takes the first abortion pill as directed, doesn't take the second abortion pill, and then manages to get promptly sufficient doses of progesterone, particularly in the first 24 hours, but even up to 72 hours, it can still be helpful. There's in the UK a 55% chance, so we more than doubled the survival rate. So we've reduced the certain mortality rate of 80% plus down to less than 50%, so 45%. That's staggering. There are very, very few interventions in medicine that such a successful rate of saving life can be achieved. The only thing I can think of probably is defibrillation, that if you don't defibrillate someone with that particular rhythm, there's a 100% chance they're going to die. And if you do defibrillate them, there's a very good chance they'll survive, at least in the short term. But we're talking about long-term success here. We're talking about a certain mortality of 80% being reduced to 45%. So, because we get very excited in medicine if a new drug comes along and reduces mortality by 10% or 15%. We think that's a great success. This is reducing it by 40%, so 35 to 40%. And it works so the progesterone, as I mentioned, mifepristone intentionally blocks the action of progesterone. And the theory is, and as it works in practice, if we can give enough progesterone, supplemental progesterone, to supplement the whatever's in the mother's body already, we too can compete with those mifepristone for those precious progesterone receptors. So you basically trying to level the playing field. So by giving mifepristone, you're giving the upper hand to the poisonous drug. By giving extra progesterone, at least you're pushing some of the mifepristone molecules out of the way. So you're giving a better chance, a fighting chance to progesterone to connect into those receptors to hopefully have some effect in saving the baby's lives. And we've been doing it, as I mentioned, to 2018, but we started our service in the UK 2020 when our first cases. Dr. Eileen Riley, who must credit for helping me to set up the service, and she was the first to engage with mothers seeking help. Between the two of us and others who have come on board since, 63 babies have been saved. But as you know, we were stopped from providing the service for the best part of a year, in the end of April 2021 up until March 2022, when complaints were made about us to the General Medical Council by the abortion industry to say that what we were doing was unethical, that we were imposing our beliefs on our pro-life beliefs, our Catholic beliefs on vulnerable women. And then an investigation took place during which time we were banned from saving lives. So in effect, we were the first 2 doctors in history to be banned from saving lives, because we already had saved 32 babies had been born by that stage. And now we've almost doubled that up to 63 since we were allowed to take.
What was the result of the complaint, the investigation by the General Medical Council?
The result was that the case investigators who eventually got around to it, and having taken into account because we got an expert witness who actually performs abortions and has no conflict of interest, but he was prepared to look at the information and give his honest opinion on it. And then the GMC got their own expert witness, who I won't say whether it was a man or woman, but he or she is again a fellow of the Royal College of Obstetricians, looked at the evidence and gave a very almost identical report to what our expert witness gave. And in addition, we got lots of statements from the budget to show there was absolutely no coercion. It was their voluntary decision. They were so grateful for the help that they received. So the outcome, once the case investigators looked at it, was that their phrase that they used was there was no prospect of finding any evidence to support the allegations that had been made. The allegations basically amounted to potential professional misconduct, that if we had been found guilty, we would have been struck off the medical register. So they said there was no prospect of finding any evidence to support any the allegations that had been made. And so the case was dismissed. But they didn't apologize. They don't apologize. They just look into it and they say, yes, this needs to go further, or no, this needs to be dismissed. It took them a lot of time. Took them, for example, we got our expert witness, my legal team that helped me through Christian Concern. We got our expert witness within 3 days. We had a full report within a week. They eventually got an expert witness after, went from the end of April up until the end of December before they got an expert witness, and he or she gave his or her report in January. So we were meant to go to court, and the court date had been set because we took the GMC to court because we felt that this was unnecessary and unjust decision and disproportionate to what we were doing. So we took them to court, and 6 days before the scheduled High Court appearance, that they released their case report and their final report on myself. Interestingly, they didn't have the same response to Dr. Eileen Riley, because she was being defended by a different group, by a secular medical defense group. And they told her basically to don't challenge this, keep your head down. Whereas my people of Christian Concern were very determined to fight this. Said we're going to fight that. This is unjust, and we're going to fight this. So Eileen's legal people did not challenge it. They did not take them to court. So the case against her wasn't dropped until 2 months later. Now they had to, once they dropped it against me, they had to drop it against her because it was similar charges, and if anything, even less so in her case because she's an obstetrician. Whereas one of the charges against me was that I'm a cardiologist. I'm a general physician. I'm not an obstetrician. Whereas so it wouldn't be in my normal practice to prescribe progesterone, although I do prescribe many other steroid hormones. So progesterone is one of many steroid hormones that are used in various indications in medicine. Whereas Eileen would have been using progesterone on a reasonably regular basis. So, but it took them 2 more months before they dropped the charges against her.
So in the case that a woman having taken the first drug then changed her mind, had a change of heart, how would she find a doctor to do this? I mean, what's the practical process that would occur?
We've established there is luckily, and then this was what puzzled me, that when initially we decided 2018, 2019, yes, we're going to do it. I just didn't know how are we going to do this. And it was Eileen who came upon it, that if we registered with a helpline, and there is one international helpline that is easily found with an internet search. It's abortionpillreversal.com, and that'll take you to. Now, it's an American-based one. It's a wonderful organization called Heartbeat International that have taken on board the Abortion Pill Reversal Network. I mentioned that in 2012 they established the service, and Heartbeat International took it over to make it more widely available for the whole nation, and then eventually internationally. So they have a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week service where there are trained nurses will take calls from anywhere in the world. They will find out if there are doctors in that region who are registered, who can provide a prescription for the mother if she's interested in going ahead with the progesterone treatment. So myself and a small number of others in the UK are registered with that Heartbeat International Abortion Pill Reversal Network. There are a few, I believe, in Ireland who are also registered with them. So there is help available within the Republic of Ireland and within Northern Ireland. So most of the calls come to us through that international helpline. However, especially before we got banned, we were getting more and more calls from some of the local pro-life organisations in the UK. So I got lots of calls from the Society of Protection of Unborn Children, SPUC. I got one or two from Christian Concern themselves. I got a few from Good Counsel, directly from Good Counsel Network. but the majority, about 85% or so, come through the international helpline. I've had a couple of calls. One young lady contacted me on social media. She saw my social media Twitter account and sent me a DM, which fortunately I looked at on the, within an hour or two of her sending, because sometimes those things can go by days before you might see them. And the most heartening one of all possibly was I got a phone call on a Saturday afternoon in early December last year, and it was from a girl who had heard about me. She knew another girl who had had a baby, having gone through abortion pill reversal treatment, and they lived close to each other actually. And she contacted this other lady, and I think she contacted her husband. She knew her husband quite well, and they gave her my she told them her situation, explained her situation, and they gave her my contact details, which I'm pleased they did. And I encouraged the girls that if they want, if any of their friends or their relatives want some help, not to hesitate to contact me directly. So I got an unusual phone number on a Saturday afternoon, which normally I'm a little bit hesitant to take, but I took it, and it was a girl explained that she'd taken the mifepristone earlier that day, so it was certainly within 6 to 8 hours or so. We got her treatment well within 12 hours. So, she had her baby last month, or the 31st.
In a situation like this, what would happen? Would you email a script to a local chemist where they could get because these days that's one of the great things about modern prescription, like you don't have to have the physical piece of paper, that you have to bring it to them or whatever. So you could email them a script to their nearest chemist, and they could
first of all, I have to ring I find out I always ask them, is there any pharmacy you don't want me to contact, because this is confidential, and I don't know their sister or their next door neighbors, but that's never happened. But I always ask them, is there anyone you don't want me to contact? So I start with the local pharmacies if they're happy with that, and then I have to ask them, do you have the drug on, but do they have progesterone on board? Now, the majority of them that I get are oral progesterone. It's a tablet called Utrogestan. Some of them prefer to not take, especially if they're vomiting or very sick, they want to go for vaginal pessaries. Just slightly less effective, but it is another option. In the US, they sometimes use intramuscular, and we can't get that here. So it's the majority are oral progesterone, which is quite widely available. It's also cheaper than the vaginal form as well, and there is more evidence in support of it. So they're the reasons I prefer to go for the oral. So I ring up the pharmacy, I ask how they got progesterone in stock, explain the dose and what I need, and the majority of the time they do. And then I ask, that's great, and then I say, now are you able to take? I tell them I'm ringing from outside the area, that I'm part of a national helpline, helping a young woman in that area, which is the truth. And I say, are you happy to accept an initial email prescription? I write out the prescription, or I type it out, and I take a photograph, I send it by email, but I also type in the details on the email too, so they've got it in both forms. But I always promise that I will send them the original copy, signed copy, the same day or the next day by first class post, which again, almost always they're prepared to. A small number of pharmacies say, oh no, we have to have the script here today. But that's unusual. The majority will say, oh yeah, that'll be fine. So number one, I have to check, do they have it in stock? Will they accept initial email prescription? Then I contact the girl to say, I'm about to send them an email. I'll send, because I always get their email address if they're happy to give it, which they always are. I said, when you receive the email from me, try to make your way as soon as you can to the pharmacy. And we've had some great ones. We've the one that sort of always springs to mind. I've told it at various conferences, but the Saturday evening, 11:25 at night, where I got a phone call from a young woman in the north of England, and then luckily she had done her research, because it's that time of the night it's really difficult to get a pharmacy. She had taken the mifepristone again about 6 hours before she was put through to me she came through the American helpline. But time was of the essence. But she was able to tell me that I've already looked up local pharmacies, and there is one in another town 30 miles away, and they'll be open until midnight. Now, this is 11:25. Right. And then I sort of have a little chat with her, make sure she understood what was involved, because you have to go through a consenting process. Then I had to phone the pharmacy, and luckily the pharmacy that she had in mind did have progesterone in stock. I told the pharmacist where she was coming from, and he said, well, she probably won't make it, but as I was phoning him, she was already on her way. Luckily her partner was very supportive. He drove her while she was on the phone, and when they were coming close to that pharmacy. They were about 10 minutes away, and it was coming up to, or it was 10 to 12, but they were still a few miles away. So she pleaded with them, could they please stay up and just an extra 10 minutes? And they did, and it was great. And she got there at 10 past 12. They'd stayed open, and she was able to start the treatment straight away. Whereas that was Saturday night, Sunday morning, a lot of pharmacies don't open till 10, 11 o'clock, and it would have been at least another 10, 12 hours before she got treatment if they hadn't done that. And then her little baby girl survived. And her little baby girl, actually later this month, her little girl will be 3 years old. So and we've had a few of those where sort of late night ones ringing around, see can we find a local pharmacy for you.
Do you have much contact with any of the women? Do you ever hear sort of the end of the story? Do you have any?
Oh yeah, well I keep contact with them the whole way through the pregnancy. So
all right.
First week I contact them every day. And I tell them, and I tell them if unless I said if you don't want me to contact, that's absolutely fine. I won't do that. But they all appreciate the support. I said, and if you have any worries, concerns, questions, anytime, day or night, just call me. Either send me a message or call me or send me an email. Because they've got my home address, they've got my email address, they've got my phone number, so they can contact me at any time. And most of them respect privacy. It's only very occasionally I've had sort of calls or texts sort of late in the night or early in the morning. But they keep in contact, and they always appreciate that. And then as the weeks go by, it becomes less necessary to phone them or to contact them every day. So I do it maybe once a week, and then if everything's going fine, and I get the feeling, because you know by them, how enthusiastic they are and so on. Like for example, that girl who phoned me, she would have spoke to me every day if we could, but eventually she put it down to maybe once a week or so. But she was so excited, and she wanted to keep getting more and more scans. She fell in love with her baby right from the start. She wanted to keep getting scans all the time. Eventually, her little boy was born. She's so in love with him, which is great. But some of the girls, want to be a little bit more just quiet and just keep things at a less intensive level, and that's fine. I'm happy to appreciate that. But I always make sure that I'm there right up until the birth, and then I tell them after that, congratulate them and so on. They're so happy, and then I ask them, is it okay if I send you a happy birthday for the child from time to time? So every year I send them just a happy, and some of them they always send back photographs. This is my little baby boy or girl and their first birthday, and they're usually very joyful photographs. So we keep in contact with them. But some of the girls now, I have lost contact. Some of the girls go off the radar. I don't know what's happened to them. They've been doing fine, and then suddenly there's no more contact. And I'll send them a message once or twice, just in case it's got lost or something. But if they haven't responded after 2 or 3, then I won't persist. Occasionally, I've had one who sort of months later have contacted me again to give me an update. I had one girl that I thought had miscarried, but she contacted me, sent me a WhatsApp message, very excited a few months later to say that she was just about to have her time was coming, which was almost due, and I presume she had just either gone ahead with the abortion or had stopped taking the treatment or whatever. But she just wanted to keep a low profile, but then in the excitement, wanted to let me know how things were going. But some do disappear, and I don't know, have they gone ahead with the abortion? Have they gone ahead, have they had the baby, but just wanted to put this episode behind them, that it's not something they want to be reminded of? And I totally respect that. Or have they been coerced to have an abortion? Or have they suffered a miscarriage, but maybe were afraid to tell me or too upset to tell me? So some of them I genuinely don't know what the outcome was, and I don't force tell them that they must tell me information. I believe it's on their terms all the time.
To your knowledge, and obviously that's limited, but to your knowledge, how many babies have been born because of this?
Yeah, well, I'm aware that there are, in my own service, 30. The 30th baby was born yesterday, which is great that I know of. And I know there was one set of twins where one of the twins was because they were born prematurely, and one didn't make it, and the other little girl is doing fine, but her twin sibling didn't make it. But we've got 30 live births, no serious complications. I said that just one premature birth, which was in 24, 25 weeks, which is not unusual for twins actually, but it was just unfortunate. But the mother is still very gracious to have very grateful to have one of the siblings. So there's 30 that I'm aware of, and I'm aware of at least 33 others. So I'm aware of 63. And I know Eileen, my colleague, had 12, and another colleague has a few more, and some have had one or two. But I'm aware of 63 that have successful births as a result of the mothers seeking the abortion pill reversal treatment. But there may be others that I don't know of.
Is the knowledge of this procedure, this drug, just as widely diffused that any GP would know about it? Or
yeah, they use it in, as I say, we use the same protocol that is used for preventing miscarriage, and it is nice that the organisation over in this country, and they're pretty powerful and influential, and on other sort of medical bodies around the world, and certainly around Europe and North America. NICE give approval for the use of progesterone for preventing miscarriage, and for women who've already had one miscarriage. Before, up until a few years ago, you had to have a few miscarriages before you could be considered for progesterone. But now they reckon if you've had one miscarriage and there are any signs of threatened miscarriage, and even before that, because I know many parents and young adults now who've now grown up whose pregnancies were saved by progesterone long before NICE ever gave approval for it, that some GP or some obstetrician realized that one of the causes of infertility is low levels of progesterone, and it's a safe drug. We can give it easily, widely available. It's not that expensive. We give it for a period of time. Now, we only give it for our use is actually for a relatively short period of time compared to the use for preventing miscarriage, because we give it up until, for example, if the girl takes mifepristone, it's, let's say, 7 weeks. So she's going to need about 5 weeks of treatment of progesterone. So if we get her to 12 weeks and she hasn't miscarried by that stage, we know that it's safe. It's probably safer actually to stop it after 2 or 3 weeks, but we keep going to 12 weeks because we know by that stage the placenta is producing enough progesterone that we don't need to give exogenous additional progesterone. If she's already over 12 weeks, which some are, because in this country, while in Ireland it's different, but in the UK you can give it up to 24 weeks, which is not recommended, but they can do. So we've had some 12, 14, 15 weeks. I give it for 2 weeks. I gave progesterone for 2 weeks, but they don't need it for long periods. Again, you could argue maybe they don't need it at all, but we can't take that chance. We don't know. It doesn't do any harm. It might help. Similarly, I often put it like I treat people with heart attacks nearly every day of the working week, and we give them all the same, almost always, unless there's a good reason not to. We give them all the same treatment, but we know deep down in doing that probably a majority of them would do just as well with less treatment or even no treatment in some cases. But we know that statistically the treatments will help. They'll help to reduce complications. They'll help to reduce extension of the heart attack or a further heart attack. But we know that there are a lot of people who would do just as well with or without treatment or with lower dose of treatment, but we give them all the same, because we can't tell. If we had some fine-tuned way to say, yes, you'll definitely get the benefit, whereas you're not going to, then it would be much easier, but we don't know that, unfortunately. There are some markers of risk and so on that we take into account, but so it's the same with the girls. So if they're over 12, 13 weeks, because unfortunately, we have lost one or two that were around the 11, 12, 13 week mark, surprisingly. Now, again, I don't know, have they taken misoprostol? Has somebody surreptitiously, because there have been a couple of cases where boyfriends or husbands have forced their partners to take misoprostol. In one case there, a boyfriend stole the progesterone and forced her to take the misoprostol. Now, I encouraged her to go to the police, because that was a criminal offence. And she wanted to keep her baby and she was forced. I don't know what the outcome of that, because I couldn't force her to go to the police. I couldn't report it. It had to go through her. And I didn't want to, whatever relationship she had. But I did encourage her to speak to a counsellor. So I think she has gone ahead with that. But those sort of things do happen. And I don't always know, because I'm going on her word. And some of them do seem a little bit less enthusiastic, a little bit more ambivalent than others. But I take them at their word. And if they say they've taken the drug, then I have to presume they've taken it, like the progesterone.
I'm conscious we took a little bit more time than I had promised you I would. So just before we close up here, what's the attitude of your colleagues to you? I mean, has there been a change? Are you just regarded as a little bit of an oddball, or he's just the Catholic, or within the wider medical community, or are doctors saying, well, if it's safe and it works and people want it, well then good luck to you. And how your colleagues see it?
Depends what you mean by my colleagues. So the people in the place where I work, very few know about it. Because I was encouraged from the start, but especially when the case came out, my medical director asked me, please don't talk to other members of staff about this. So this is a confidential thing. We don't want adverse publicity. And either they didn't want either good publicity or bad publicity. We just want it. So I've respected that. So I don't talk to people, although one or two have sent me little private messages to thank me, especially those who are Christian but don't. You may not know that they're Christian. So there's one. I got an email recently from a colleague who was a Christian. I didn't realize he was Christian, but he thanked me for the work that I was doing. Without going into too much detail, every year we have to have an annual appraisal, and I had to, one of the stipulations from the General Medical Council, that I had to ensure that this issue, that because it was medical work, even though it's not part of my normal job, but because it's, anyone who's doing private work or charity work should talk about the extra things they do in their annual appraisal, because this all has to be taken, accounted for, if you like. So I have to talk to like another senior colleague will do the annual appraisal. So the person I've had doing it with me for the last 2 years has been very supportive, actually. He was very impressed, actually, even though he's not Catholic, he's not Christian, but he didn't know anything about it. But he was quite impressed by it. But others, I know that one or two others do know about it, but they don't say anything. Now, I don't know, is that because they're just reluctant to get involved, or is it because they're actually opposed to what I'm doing, but know that they can't say anything too strong against me? So I don't really know what their position is. Obviously, from fellow Catholics within the Catholic Medical Association, and within a few fellow Christians within the Christian Medical Fellowship, and those of us, there are a small number of us who are, outspoken pro-life doctors in the UK, so they're all very supportive. Even though a little reluctant or afraid to get involved sometimes because of what happened to myself and Dr. Riley. But there are others who are, certainly supportive and keen to know a little bit more, and are maybe thinking about becoming involved.
Well, listen, I'm going to thank you for joining us tonight. Before we go, I'd just like to thank people for joining us online, and say, as I said, if you can hit the subscribe and the donate button, that would be much appreciated. But Dr. Kearney, I imagine we'll be back to have another chat. There's other issues I wanted to talk about, we didn't get to talk, but for the moment, I'd like to thank you for joining us. I'd like to thank you for the work that you're doing, and I think it's great, and for the women that you have helped, and for the babies that have been born. I think that's a wonderful story. So thank you, Dr. Kearney, and thank you for joining us, and we'll be back soon with more material.
Pleasure. Thank you very much.